program shut. Oh.
Holy moly. That's why we're so smart in the South, because obviously they don't go to school because we don't if there's chance of ice. So they must stay home.
Unless the girls walk home in the cold of the year.
Yeah, they'll get barefooted.
I used to disparage Texas the way they handled it, but once you realize that they don't have the same equipment, they don't have the same, they
Well, they
can't
don't know how
deal
to
with the
drive.
roads the same way.
Okay, I think we've got this up on the screen.
A thumbs up first, though.
You're gonna manage the document,
I will.
right? Okay. So what we've done after our discussion this morning, we appreciate y'all's feedback about some of the hangups that are problematic to y'all. We recognize that there are still a larger set.
Do you want to use the mic?
There's still a larger set of issues, but we wanted to focus on what appeared to us to be some of the primary concerns. When we came back this morning, we had given you our proposal as the product of the committee, subcommittee sessions, trying to figure out what we thought was doable and so forth and so on, expecting some counter proposals back from y'all. So I'm afraid perhaps, and I apologize on behalf of our team if there was some misunderstanding there. Those are not, hard bottom line positions. And so what we've tried to do here is to cut to the chase on some items that we heard concerns about from y'all and are looking forward to some continuing feedback here. I hope that you will see these 6 key issues as a legitimate demonstration of the city's intention to move this labor agreement into the completed phase. And so you see under anonymous complaints, what we have here, that complaints that are in direct contradiction to the chain of command reporting policy of the department, mandatory reporting requirements, don't fall under the meaning of anonymous complaint. But the key piece here on resolving this issue, we've already talked about the other alternatives, the exceptions to officer reporting internally. But the key piece here is that there's no duty by the Office of Police Oversight to determine or reveal the identity of such complainant. We think that that strikes an appropriate balance, that it makes it clear that OPO is not in the business of enforcing the police department's policies about whether or not officers are required to report, whether or not their reports. I think you used some examples of officers filing complaints against other officers for career objectives or other kinds of things that are really not a part of the OPO process that we're looking for. And I think that this resolves those issues. It leaves within the chief's oversight and purview the kind of things that frankly are a part of best practice policing, which is teaching officers to be responsible, to report peer misconduct, to own up to the obligations that they have, and not to file, complaints that really are not justified, that are retaliatory or have some other purpose, and that's still the chief's prerogative. On the other hand, if an officer comes into OPO, wearing a badge and a uniform and says, I want to file a complaint, it's not the OPO's business to enforce those department rules. And hopefully that's something that gets pretty close to what you feel like needs to happen here. You made it clear that you're committed to members of the community filing anonymous complaints. I know that Chief Chacon and past and future chiefs in this department are going to be absolutely interested in any viable potential information that requires follow-up to determine whether or not there has been misconduct, find the facts, and then move forward in an appropriate fashion. So the next item is on the compelled testimony. We've adjusted this to make it clear that the exception intended here is an order of the chief to appear and provide testimony or evidence to the OPO within the confines of an internal affairs interview that had previously indicated an investigation. So I think that removes the concern or ambiguity that you saw there in that provision. I think that's the only adjustment there. It's just the adjustment of that word, but that's a big piece based on what your feedback was to us. The next item, and these are not in order as you can see, the 24-48 hours, we're prepared to go forward with former language on that and to drop that proposal. The recommendations post DRH by the OPO, what we're proposing here is just to strike these two subparts of that section. The things that we're striking out here, C and D, and then G down there at the bottom, I think this caused a good bit of confusion. They're not necessary. The OPO is a city director, the police chief's a city director. They can talk to each other and communicate, and that's not really a contract question that we really need to deal with or resolve. And then I think the same thing is true about G. I don't think those are things that any of us feel like need to be in the labor agreement. And perhaps just the removal of those, we're hoping will just resolve issues or concerns there about how that process works. Frankly, we think that the best way for many of these operations to work, and I've told you that it's the city manager's commitment going forward to make sure that there is a much more constructive relationship between the chief's office, his office, and the Office of Police Oversight. Obviously, that's one of the reasons we've added the routine meetings and so forth, so that there's enhanced communication there.
Did we add B there?
Yes, and just to let y'all know, we added letter B there. A designated attorney from the city attorney's office may be present during such deliberations.
And I think we talked about that before in the public session. I think the committee talked about that nobody has a problem with the OPO, having their own counsel, and nobody has a problem with a designated attorney from the city attorney's office being present in these meetings. What we've done here,
Make that smaller so it's all on one page so they
Yeah.
can see what we've done.
let you see the big picture here, and then I'll kind of focus in on the language. We are modifying our proposal on the 365 days. What we're proposing is that we continue with the 180-day rule with current language, but that we add to this a provision, and you'll see this is, has a direct connection or corollary to some of the issues that have been identified by members of the community. And this has to do with the listed types of misconduct: in custody deaths, use of force involving serious bodily injury, arrest or detention on false criminal charges, falsification of police report or false testimony, official oppression, and civil rights violations. So what we're proposing here is that instead of a proposal to you that's been highly problematic, that y'all have pushed back throughout this bargaining cycle for doubling the 180 days, that we would limit the 365-day, 1-year limitations period for police misconduct to these serious allegations of misconduct, for the practical reality that the investigations are more complex, they take a longer period of time, and we think that there is a real justification for that. So we're asking you to seriously consider that as an amendment to the contract that basically cuts our ask in half. So let's take then a look at the G file, and let's see.
This is where we had the critical incidents.
What we're proposing here is just to delete that section of our prior proposal. We haven't captured that or shown you a strikeout there. You made it clear this morning that the critical incident request from the G file, that we would just recategorize the G file as inapplicable to critical incident investigations, that was a non-starter for y'all, and so we are eliminating that request from our proposals. We have your follow-up inventory of a number of the outstanding issues that we've just received. And we thank you for giving us the inventory so we can look over those. We'd welcome any feedback on that and are prepared to go back and look at other issues on that list. I will mention, we talked about this morning The issue about external and internal complaints, we know that we still need to have cleanup there, and it's our intention to have a process there that effectively goes through the classification of complaints, invest that process before complaints end up being in the public sphere pre-classification and before they're in the appropriate channel for investigatory purposes.
Make sure they know that's a package.
So we brought this to you as kind of a package deal. We think it is a constructive way to begin to move things off the table and check them off. We would ask for you to give us a package response and try to see whether or not there's other things we can pull into this and move forward as quickly as possible to get the controversies off of the table and see what else we need to get resolved before we can move forward. Our next target's going to be the internal, external thing that we just talked about here. And hope to get this on the list, and don't have it yet. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Villarreal. Looks like you want to talk about the list you sent us.
Yeah, on that, I was just going to tell you that I applaud this, that came. It looks like once y'all are already down here ready to go, so just trying to work through that and just, you know, in the spirit of openness, just get ideas or concerns we had down to get over to you guys. Lowell, we talked me through on the injury to the public or citizen rights. The first place my mind goes on those 6 listed situations is that today in those situations, the police department's probably getting a letter from the attorney general's office or notifying the AG's office that there's a desire to press the pause button, right, let these things play out, and then deal with them at the conclusion of a criminal investigation. Just help me understand
Absolutely.
the why, if you can.
Well, the number one why in terms of facilitating a longer period of time to process these is that they tend to be higher profile, they tend to be more complex, they frequently involve multiple issues. You know, these are the big deal investigations. It's critical to get them right. The practical reality, I think, and I'll pick this up from, you know, part of the comments that you said, you know, throughout my 40-year career in doing this, many of these kinds of incidents, including ones that are well known in Austin, involve either pending criminal charges or pending criminal investigations. You know, just as an example for members of the public that may not be as familiar with this as some of us are, you know, during the day I'm reading emails about a case we've got in Harris County, you know, that still is in the DA's office and they've taken no action on it, and we've got a live civil case. And so that's many times true, you know, that you have pending criminal cases where either under the existing 143 statute, there's been a postponement with a letter to the Attorney General. And so as a practical matter, a number of the cases that are in these categories would find themselves in an extended time frame in any event. So we think it's actually in everybody's best interest to have that time frame. The other flip side of that is, and I've heard Mr. Lord say this many times, normally these kind of incidents create an investigation, you know, early in the process. And so we're not dealing with a situation to where the city's not doing their job or they're dragging their feet or they're, you know, not moving forward when they have what they need to move forward. So we're not really seeing a big practical downside in terms of protecting the rights of officers with that additional 180-day period. So that's our thinking on that. I hope that answers your questions. If you have any other specific questions, I'll try to respond to them.
I don't have any questions, Ron. I think let us caucus and talk about it. We got it and tried to kind of cruise through it right before we came down. But just give us an opportunity to have an in-depth conversation, especially after your explanation and stuff. And we'll go from there.
Very good. We will reconvene in our group and go over the other list that you sent us and be prepared to get back when you are.
Okay, thank you.
Is it on? On? There you go. All right, we appreciate the stuff you sent to us. What we'd ask you to do, plus the stuff that, the language that Thomas sent to you, if you'll incorporate all that into the red line, then you can get that to us. What we would say is we probably would prefer not, well, tomorrow we have trouble meeting anyway, and I don't think we could do it on a Zoom, but if you get it to us, or at least tomorrow, then our team will start working through it and make sure things that you've proposed with the things we have. If you have any questions, then about what it is we need, reach out to Angie or Jessica or Thomas, and we'll explain what it is that we'd like in there. I think we can get pretty close on all of this. There may be a few issues, but today we're reasonably optimistic. I think the next meetings are next week. I'd like to at least exchange enough documents that when we get there, we have everything on the table. And we wanted to discuss money today, or of course if you've got money to put on the table, we're listening. If not, then next week we would expect to do that. And then whatever the changes in 13 and 19 that you made, it's really pretty much, it's done except for a couple of minor things. I haven't gotten those back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just say here are a couple of changes. That'll leave us with everything in a red line form for the team to look at. So, anything else?
Any comments?
I have one comment.
Yeah, that's what I thought you did.
So the only comment I have, Angie, I had thought on the panel training that you were gonna try to come up with something that was in between what we had and what y'all had.
We talked about what we could do, because we do understand, that sometimes people have full-time jobs and giving them some ability to be able to complete those things. But once we get a red line from you guys, we can give something back on that as far as what our team is willing. But we do as a team need to discuss that still to figure out.
Okay, so the reason we had gone back to our original language versus the last iteration is because we had thought you were gonna have a compromise language. So, I mean, we can both work on that from both sides, but that was kind of where, that's why the red line came back old news, basically, so.
Okay.
Right, everything else?
So we can assume that you'll still be moving toward the middle, right?
We're working on it.
We had some thoughts about it that we'll put them together. We recognize people are volunteering their time. We recognize they're civilians who want to do public service. And we don't want them, by the time they're term-ins, they're still going to classes. We accept that, and we got some ideas. We do think that riding with the officers at various times is in many ways more important at times than certain types of training, which they may never see. But we're willing to work on that and be flexible. We do want members of the panel to come out and ride just to see that it's a different world than television. Because if you've never done it, then you have no perception whatsoever about the reality of policing. And so we think that's an important element, but we're willing to work with you so that they're not spending the first 6 months going to classes.
Okay.
All right?
Yes.
Yep.
What about tomorrow?
No.
So as I understand it, we're going to not meet tomorrow, is that right? That's what I heard Ron say.
That's what I heard as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to plan on that and then the roads are shut down or people have their children to pick up. We're going to use the time productively because the team will work through all of this, plus I want to get 13, 19, everything in order so our team can start looking through, and then we can see clearly the TAs and everything. So by the time we get to the meeting next week, we should have a clear idea of what we've agreed on and what is still left to be determined.
All right, very good.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
Likewise, I guess we'll see you next week and wait to see what you can come up with between now and then on the red line draft.
We will.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did somebody get that, Ashley? I sent it.